My name's Jeffrey Sidoris, and this might be one of the most process-driven episodes of Process Driven yet. I've known Karl Taylor for more than a decade. I was introduced to his work by my friend Patrick in the form of a DVD of Karl's photography masterclass. What struck me straight away was Karl's enthusiasm for photography. Well, that and his near encyclopedic knowledge of the medium. Now, 12 years after its initial release, Karl has created a brand new remastered version of his original Introduction to Photography, built on a decade of learning and refining what was already an incredible understanding of both the art and science of photography. In this conversation, we talk about some of the things he's learned over the past 10 years, including a deep dive into the biology of how we see and process images. Here's my conversation with Karl Taylor.
Please listen carefully.
You know, one of the things that I really love about talking to you is, and have for the past decade, is your transparency. There's no, this is my secret, this is my technique, this is exclusive to me. Your willingness to share your knowledge and insights into your business and what's been going on in your business is a pretty rare thing.
Yeah, I'm happy to share my experiences, and I'm not sort of secretive about, failures and successes. I mean, obviously, let's not forget though that some of the knowledge to do with the photography we share at a price because we're in business to do that, so we don't share everything related to every little bit of photography knowledge for free. I certainly don't do that, but I am totally happy to share my experiences without veiling anything behind a secret wall or something,
Well, you know what? I'm going to have to disagree with you on that, because you're getting ready to relaunch this new course this is the course that put you on the map, arguably, and this time you're giving it away for free. So you are giving it out.
Yes. Well, we are. And but I suppose that's because partly the market has shifted as well for us. When we started, as you know, the Introduction to Photography course came about because there was a huge upsurge at that time in interest in digital cameras. Digital cameras really only became popular, 11, 12 years ago. And we noticed this as a business and as photographers. And that grew to the idea of coming up with this Introduction to Photography course. And that was a course that we sold and was very successful. It was serialized on Popular Photography magazine in America. And it was huge. But now the goalposts have shifted somewhat, or to a great degree, really, because our main business now in the education sector, as we've grown into this larger education business, is now on the more specialized skills of professional photography, lighting, post-production, conceptualization, pre-visualization, all of the more, the more in-depth level knowledge. So the beginner market isn't really our market anymore, but we did want to give something back. And we could have just put the old introduction course out there for free, but we decided, no, actually, let's bring it up to date and make it better.
See, I don't think you could have. knowing you for the past decade, I don't think you would have been satisfied by just putting it out there at all.
No, because I don't want to put anything bad out there. And Georgie, who works here, she made a really good point. She said, look, there are elements of this course that looking dated, like your jeans that you're wearing, for instance, Karl, the clothes that you're dressed in.
Yeah, Karl had these ripped up jeans and a Frankie Say Relax t-shirt on through most of it.
I got that off you. So no, we set about, we refilmed it all, or most of it, and one thing we especially did was made a lot more effort on the graphics. As you know, it's become easier to produce decent quality graphics and stuff in Premiere, After Effects, and all the rest of it for people like us. So yeah, we just redid the whole thing. And Georgie is also one of the team here. She's created a 100-page ebook to accompany the course. And the book that she's done, the ebook, it's a standalone product in itself, you know. It's really good. I mean, it's as a supplement to the course, and it covers the things in the course, and it adds some additional elements of a few things that maybe aren't covered as in depth in the course. So that's all much pretty ready to go. So we're going to be putting it out there for free. Hopefully it will get people interested and excited about photography, or those that are new to it, or those that have put a camera down on the shelf in frustration. Maybe they'll think about picking it up again. But, you know, it's, as I said to you before, it's not totally altruistic, because we want traffic to the website. So by putting a free course out there, if our main market is photography, lighting and pro level photography, every one of those people that's into pro lighting and studio or whatever, they all had to start with picking up a camera originally.
Right.
So this for us feels like a sensible stepping stone into our platform. Come and see how I teach. Come and see how I break things down into bite-sized pieces, and experience how effectively you will learn, and then park that and come back to us in a couple of years or 6 months when you want to step it up a gear.
Right.
So that's kind of the ethos behind it, really.
Well, you did do something interesting, though, and that is that you didn't put it behind any sort of paywall or subscription form, or give us your email and we'll give you that. There's no exchange at all. It's just come here and watch this course. Yeah,
and that's because we believe, you know, if you put it behind any sort of sign up or whatever, obviously it'll deter more than 60 or 70% of people away, because people are precious about giving their emails away. And to be honest, it's much better if the course is just widely shared, because people realize anyone can watch it without any limits. Because if it's widely shared, it becomes more viral, and then it puts our name out there to a greater degree, which is a positive for us. So no, we weren't really worried about, you know, give us your email to get this free course. Although in saying that, you have to give us your email to get the 100-page ebook. But you don't need the ebook to do the course. The course is standalone video course, 10 chapters. I think it's nearly 2 hours long in total now, with all the new elements and graphics. It's got a number of great examples, and we're really, really pleased with it. I said to the guys, I was really proud of everyone that's worked on it. I said, it's a really nice production, really nice piece. And I said, hopefully, the way I look at it is, hopefully when people see it and watch it, I want them at the end of it to be going, I can't believe that was free, you know? Yeah. Which is, you want to put that good feeling in people's minds, because then they'll remember that. And then when they want to think about maybe moving on to natural light portraiture, or using some speed lights, or buying a couple of studio lights, then you know, we'll be remembered as the people that helped them on their journey, you know? So do you feel, because one of the things that I really resonated with about that first series, and you and I have talked about this a number of times, was the level of enthusiasm that you have for photography, both as a technical pursuit and as an artistic pursuit. How has that changed in the past 10 years? Hasn't changed at all. Not at all. I think I've learned a few bigger words. But enthusiasm. I mean, I tell you what. Actually, we did a shoot last night on the platform where we were doing still lifes of an egg. So I had this challenge to shoot an egg in a number of different ways, and how you could use things like color theory, conceptualization, and then lighting to describe the emotion and the mood. You wouldn't believe how enthusiastic I got about an egg, because I think what I really enjoyed, like, for example, with that particular show, was imparting that information to people and seeing them get it. Right. It's like, okay, he's just taken a simple object, but things like the perspective, the lens choice, the angle of view choice, then the lighting, the emotive element of the lighting, and why this light gives this emotion, this one gives a different emotion, and demonstrating that to them live, they're like, wow, I can really see it. So that always makes me feel good whenever and even when I, you know, occasionally do live shows for an audience at an event or something for someone. When you can do something that's people go, right, I really start to understand it. You see sort of a light bulb go off in their eyes. And that is always pleasing for me.
Right.
And I think my enthusiasm for photography won't die because I've always got an enthusiasm for creating images, whether I'm creating images just on my own in the studio or with an assistant or for an audience. It doesn't matter. I'm just excited about creating images.
Mm-hmm.
But in saying that, there have been times in business where like any business, you've had struggles and ups and downs, and it can suck the life out of you sometimes. And I'm sure in the same way for you as a designer, you can lose the momentum or the passion for the art because
mm-hmm.
you almost feel that it's failing you somewhat, or I've always dedicated nearly my entire life to photography. So when things don't go well, you almost feel like it's betraying you.
Right.
And I think that has an effect sometimes on creativity. But when that happens, I think it's best to just step back from it for a little bit and hit the reset button.
Right.
Then go again, And I often find as well, I know you've talked on many of your previous podcasts and things about creativity in the arts, but I always find for me, I've never become depressed about anything in that sense, but I do sometimes feel the need to stop. And I find my creativity comes in waves, and I don't try to force creativity when I know I'm not in the flow. It's like I do a lot of commercial shoots, and commercial shoots for me are just client gives me a brief. This is the advert that's going to be produced. They want this, this, and this. That's just like a walk in the park for me, because someone's just told me what they need, how they want it to look. I might consult with them and say, well, look, I think you should do this, do this. It's almost like a color by numbers. It's so easy for me in that respect. And I don't want to sound arrogant in that way, but you're not the producer. They're the producer. You're the executor. Okay. So for me, doing commercial product photography, advertising images, yes, there's creativity involved, but you're following someone else's desire or requirements. Mm-hmm. So I don't ever feel that the creative juices need to be full flowing for me to accomplish that, because the experience takes over for that. But when it comes to doing my own shoots, like these ones I was just doing recently and some other ones I've done recently, I have to be in the right frame of mind to give it all. And that sometimes will determine that, like, the guys will say, right, are we going to do that shoot that you've already sketched out? And I'll say, no, not this week, because I know the way I'm feeling. It's not that I get depressed or anything about the art. It's just that I know when I just feel like one of those people that I know when I've got more energy, and I can then apply the energy more enthusiastically. I'd say I'm always enthusiastic, but there's still like a wavelength,
right? A
waveform maybe that I know I can ride the wave and do the job better at that peak moment rather than the trough, if you know what I mean.
Go back to something you said a minute ago about being an executor versus a producer. Is that something that for you was a little bit of a struggle early on in your career, accepting that the brief was what was important, not what you brought to the brief, or you weren't hired for necessarily thinking outside the box. You were hired because you could produce what they wanted. Is that hard to wrap your head around for you as a younger photographer, as a newer photographer?
Well, when I first started in photography, I mean, if we go back to the very beginning, my earliest jobs in photography was assisting or was working in professional darkrooms, printing, Cibachrome, Ilfochrome, or whatever it is now, etc. Then moving into assisting in studios. And then eventually I worked as a photojournalist for myself, freelance for a few years. So you weren't following a brief then, you were following a storyline and trying to collect the right images to go with that story. So you had a lot more freedom in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Was the storyline given to you, or did you pitch the storyline?
It depends. Sometimes there were simple things that the magazine needed a few images to go with a particular storyline. Wasn't particularly difficult, more cultural. And then there were other times where I'd come up with the story of what I wanted to shoot, or the people, or the culture, and the geographical location. And then the magazine would say to you, "Look, sounds great. You deliver it. We'll buy it, but." It was freelance, so you don't get paid until you deliver it anyway. So you just had to get approval from them that they would be interested in the story. So you would present the story. So, for example, I've photographed the Mentawai people in Sumatra, Dayaks in Borneo, the Dani tribes in Papua New Guinea or Irian Jaya. So you'd present the story that you want to go and photograph this culture, these people, how they live, what they do, etc., etc. And the magazine would say, yes, that we'd be interested in that if you can deliver it. So you obviously had a lot more freedom. You know, you're traveling for months and you're shooting. You got all the trials and tribulations of working in the field, etc. But there was no restrictions or art direction on that type of photography whatsoever. But when I moved into commercial photography, which came off the back of working as an assistant in commercial studios and becoming interested in light and studio lighting and that manipulation of light, which is what's now absorbed my entire passion of photography, is really about manipulating light. And I don't even like to use the word manipulating, because I feel light is like a magic, special, godlike ingredient. So I'm not really manipulating it, I'm guiding it, you know, and it's allowing me to do it almost in many ways. So I feel like light it's almost like some sort of just magical quantity that I get to work with, and I'm fascinated by it. So that's one of the things that's the biggest passion I would say I get from the type of images I produce, is the way hopefully I can control light. You combine that with other things. So yes, obviously when you're then given a brief by an art director for an advertising shoot, you are not coming up with the idea for the shot. You're not coming up with even the composition of the shot is decided, because the layout of the advert, but you are still in charge of controlling the light, because they don't understand that. They don't know. They understand mood and they understand the tone of voice and the sort of feeling they want for the shot and maybe the color, but they still really don't know how to control the light to get it to do what they want. So they give you a load of mood boards and they say, is this possible? Is that possible? And what I actually love, even though a lot of the creative elements are taken out of the equation, you're still in control of the light and creating the emotion with the light. And you actually can improve on their ideas because of your knowledge of light. So for me, that's always been satisfying. And then to be blunt, when you're starting out as a commercial photographer, when I was I did the photojournalism in my mid-20s and then became a commercial photographer in my late 20s. When you're starting out, you're just grateful to get the work. So you're not going to really be too worried about whether you feel you've got enough creative control. You're just happy every job that's coming through the door. But even to today, when art directors or clients, ad agencies come in the studio here and work with me, I'm still satisfied from the experience of, controlling the light for them to deliver the result and the mood and the emotion that they wanted in the shot. Obviously, with the education platform or with creating my own personal work, then I've got full creative control. And like the images I was just doing yesterday, I concept them, come up with the idea, the narrative, consider all of the elements, the location or the set in the studio, etc. So you have total control. So yes, you feel like you are doing more creatively, but I don't feel any negativity towards doing commercial work that it isn't creative, even though I said I'm just executing it. I get my passion from controlling the light.
Was there a moment in that transition from photojournalism to studio photographer and commercial photographer, was there a moment, kind of an aha moment, where you saw what you could do with light, or what was possible with light? Because it sounds like you were pretty happy with the photojournalism and the travel, and it seems like such a dramatic shift to go, okay, I'm going to leave this behind in favor of this new thing that I find myself kind of obsessed with.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't really understand light that well when I was doing photojournalism. I understood photography, the moment, and research and planning and all the things that were needed to create a successful image or story. And I recognized through experience of shooting, as all photographers do, that there are periods and times of the day when the light just looks better, that magic hour period, or maybe when there's some really beautiful cloud formations that are just letting light through particular spots and spaces, and you start to appreciate light and realize when opportunities arise from light, but you're not in control of it. You're just working with what you're given, and you recognize when it's good what you're given. So that was something that evolved. But what happened was I did the photojournalism thing. It was a hand-to-mouth existence, one job to the next, and living out of a backpack and traveling and living out of a backpack. And, eventually it just wasn't working out for me. I wasn't going to make a full-time career out of it. I was freelancing. And it was good while I was doing it, but I just started to get to a point in my life. I thought, right, I'm getting towards my late 20s, and this isn't going to pay the bills properly if I want to settle down. So I just started to look at other things, and then I ended up assisting in a studio, and I started to see these guys controlling light to make something like a vodka bottle or a whiskey bottle or a perfume or a food shot or whatever. And they were controlling light to make something boring look amazing. And that just fascinated me. And that's when I became captivated by that. And then I kind of moved my energy in that direction. So it is a strange transition, I admit, but it was partly for a business decision, in that I knew I wanted to continue a career in photography, but I didn't feel there was any future for me in photojournalism. And I just kind of accidentally ended up discovering studio photography by working as an assistant in one.
Right. How long were you assisting before you decided, right, I can do this, I need to step out?
About a year.
About a year.
Yeah, a year. Because I think I'm obviously it wasn't like I didn't know anything about photography.
Right.
It was just I didn't know anything about light or controlling light. So it was just simply learning that. And there's no better way to learn than assisting, people that know what they're doing. And especially if you're passionate about it and you're excited about it. And I walked away from that thinking, yeah, right, I could do this. But what's really interesting off the back of that is that was, that was more than 20 years ago. And I thought I kind of knew my stuff until about 10 years ago, when I really knew my stuff. So there was a whole level of thinking about light and how to control light and the basics of hard light and soft light. But actually, when you go down the rabbit hole, it goes so much deeper if you really, really get into it and start actually looking at some of the physics to do with why a parabolic reflector, a proper parabolic reflector, will give a certain look. And some people claim they can't see a difference. It's either soft or it's hard, but it's not. It's beyond that. They might not be able to see it, but emotionally you can perceive it. And so will ordinary people. And there are many elements to do with even flagging a light and just putting a tiny little bit of additional shade. And then a lot of it is to do with the post-production elements. And I'm not talking about comping or changing things dramatically, because I don't like to do that. I'm just talking about burning and dodging. But, people burn and dodge randomly without even knowing why they're doing it. If you understand, things like left to right gaze bias, and you understand about predetermined contrast levels and how the eye will move around an image based on that, and even things like reducing color intentionally. so that the image becomes more absorbable because your brain is not having to process as much other information that can cause distraction. So I always try to deliver images that have high impact clarity, quite simplicity to them in many ways. But like I created not so long ago this marine pollution environmental image of a baby sat with a hypodermic needle in a big valley of marine litter and plastic pollution.
Yeah, that's a very disturbing image, Karl.
It's a very disturbing image, and it was on the cover of Geographical last month, and it's been used by marine organizations and scientists all over the world now, because I put it out there for free as a charity thing. So it's been, it was on the BBC and all sorts of stuff. So it's been a very effective, powerful image, but it's a very complicated image, because it's not like the normal shots I shoot, which is normally an object on a platform with really nice lighting so that it's simplicity and clarity. This was a very busy image. Now, when you deal with a really busy image like that, with lots of content and lots of competing textures and competing colors and competing contours, you have to then figure out how you're going to guide the eye. So you have to guide the eye through very careful use of burn and dodge, so luminosity values, but then the color can become overwhelming in an image like that. So in that particular image, you think you're looking at some really nice colors in that image, but if you actually really study it closely, the images have been very carefully and selectively drawn back. Some of the colors that were sort of different but in the same palette have been shifted to match each other, and the color palette has been reduced so that there isn't, such a vast rainbow of colors that there was in the original. Then that's combined with the burn and dodge. It's also the lighting in the initial stages in the studio. It's been lit in a certain way to emphasize certain places in the image. But you see, it's that level of understanding of lighting, and color is light. Color is just a frequency of light. So it's that level of understanding that is way beyond where I was 10 years ago. And that's why I always find it fascinating, because I don't ever consider that there is nothing left to learn. I read physics books, I read scientific papers. I do this workshop with Tim Flack, who also studies all of this sort of stuff. And I am hugely passionate about learning more about light and how humans perceive images. As a matter of fact, that's probably one of the most important things that I've asked myself in the last few years, is rather than photography and everything associated with recording an image, I stepped back because of conversations with Tim Flack and asked, how do we see images rather than how do we record images? And that stepping back and asking how we see images,
the physicality of how we see them,
the physicality of the biological process of how we see images and how we process them in the brain, how that's done and why it's done a certain way, why we've got certain neurons that get more excited by diagonal lines, why we read images from left to right, no matter what culture we're from, why certain combinations of tonal range or certain colors, like in Monet's painting, was it Le Grenouille de Ben or something, the Bath of Frogs, why certain color combinations cause optical illusions. So I became fascinated by all of that stuff. And that led me to read a lot more deeper sort of physics and stuff about it, about why we react a certain way to images. And that's become a large part of my process now. When I produce an image, I'm conscious of these things because I'm more conscious now of how humans see images and biologically why they see images a certain way. So I apply that knowledge in the production of the image now.
Give me an example. Give me kind of a real world example of how some of these ideas and how some of these, how biology specifically has affected how you either light or compose an image? For people that are listening that may be kind of scratching their heads, how does that translate from theory to practice?
Well, okay, first of all, if you immediately know that we read images in from the left to the right, but not in a horizontal line. As a matter of fact, the most useful path into an image visually is from the lower left up to the center. So what Tim does in a lot of his work, what I do in mine now, is I direct people into my images that way, in many ways, with a diagonal line, diagonal shadow, or some element of components that will step you into the image, or the contrast or something in the lower left will take you across the page in that direction. Then you have to think about not letting them out of the right-hand side of the image. So let me, I don't know, I mean, I know we're doing a podcast here, but let me give you an example. So for, there's an image of a Tom Ford bottle, aftershave perfume bottle lying on its back in some liquid on my website. Now that's a commercial product style image, but that's been carefully post-production work so that the patch of water, the curve of the wave on the lower left has been highlighted to take you to the highest contrast point, which is on the left-hand side of the bottle, just below
where the
shoulder.
bottle meets the liquid. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not even looking at the image, and I can tell you this. And then the waves on the right, there's some beautiful ripples on the right, but they were too beautiful and they were too high contrast. They're near the right-hand side of the shot. So those have been completely toned down, decontrasted, reduced in contrast, so that you don't escape from the image on that side. So you're trying to keep the viewer going up from the lower left into the shot, and then circling around within the shot without escaping out of the shot. Because everyone gets into composition when they start in photography. They're obsessed with composition, rule of thirds, golden spiral, golden ratio. And I've come to realize after 25 years that it's mostly bollocks.
Don't hold back, Karl. Just tear down every.
And the reason is some of it, yes, things like rule of thirds definitely for beginners help you conform the image, lay it out aesthetically that looks better than just sticking the person in the middle shot. Absolutely. But none of it is as important as just keeping the viewer in the image. That is the only objective, because a successful image can only be judged by how long the viewers want to look at it. That's it. So if you can do everything possible to take them into the picture in the right direction, circulate them in the image so that they want to go round it several times and study it and don't get taken out of it, and it holds their attention, the longer it holds their attention, then the more successful it is.
Right.
That's really the only sort of basis I think you can apply to an image. The success of an image is literally how long will it hold the viewer's attention for? And that is essentially what I'm doing with lighting, or the post-production to the lighting, or my choice of content. And it has many things. You're talking about the visual processes there, but it's to do with many things. It's to do with facial recognition. It's to do with emotion and narrative. Even the narrative in the image, the conceptual part of the image, what it kind of makes you feel. So, for example, I've got an image on my website of two lipsticks stood on the very edge of what looks like a giant diving board or something.
Right.
But when you look at that image, without even having to tell your audience who'd look at that image, you immediately you kind of project those two lipsticks into being human figures or people. You start to think about the drop, the edge, the anxiety.
Yeah, the sort of precariousness of them at the edge.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that is what I introduced into a lot of my work. And the shot I was working on last night was an egg, and I put an egg in a similar situation, but I made it look like it was on the edge of a tall building. The tall building was just made of white Formica, but it looked like it was a block shape, lit in a certain way, and it felt ominous. And the egg was right on the edge, but it was just an egg, and it was leaning over because we glued it. We glued the egg so that it just had a little bit of lean. So it looked like it was looking over the edge, but a little bit too precariously that it might accidentally go. And everyone knows what happens if you go over the edge, especially for an egg, like Humpty Dumpty, boom. But it's adding that sort of ambiguous narrative into the image that helps you hold the viewer's attention. So then on top of that, you also have to add the emotion that matches that narrative. And you add that emotion through light. So and you also add it through color or lack of color. So what we'll see, for example, in that the image I said about the baby amongst all the rubbish, is that image was far too complex with texture and color and narrative to all be absorbed biologically by a human mind without it becoming distracting. So you have to think about, the human mind can't process all this color and this narrative and this texture and this lighting and this complexity without getting frustrated. So you have to decide what to take back. Mm-hmm. And then doing that, you kind of control the viewer's experience a little bit. I mean, it's obviously to do with the composition and how you decide to lay it out and everything else. But all of these factors have to work together, I believe, to create a successful image. And I say I believe, I don't believe, I know. Right. I know it.
Well, and it looks like, to your point, in this image, it looks like you've pulled some of the contrast down at the edges. You've allowed some of the saturation to stay in, what is it rope or netting that the little baby's sitting on? It looks like you've allowed some of the saturation and contrast to be.
I've left the yellow one,
yeah. But then the rest of that, it feels very painterly. Really,
it is. It's like a Renaissance painting style to it, because that's the color that I've basically taken it out of it. Mm-hmm. And then if you notice the green elements in there, so essentially, if you actually ask yourself what colors are in there, there's a lot of green, sort of teal, cyany color. Mm-hmm. Now, those colors were all over the place in the real shot. There was stuff that was blue, vivid blue. A lot of fishing net stuff is very vivid blue. There was bright green stuff, because some fishing nets are bright green as well. But there was this mixture of that color palettes of blues, greens, and teals and cyans that were very vivid. So I just pulled them all back into the same color. Mm-hmm. So that they're not competing with each other anymore.
No, and if you squint, I mean, this is something that we learned in school. If you squint, it kind of removes the detail, and you can see that these are all very similar values.
Exactly.
In terms of luminance.
You're taking the confusion away.
Yeah.
But if you squint, exactly the right technique, because what you do when you squint and you look through your eyes, you're turning high frequency spatial information into low frequency information. And in doing so, you're now left seeing the tonal values. And if you now squint at that image of the baby through your eyes, you'll see that the baby luminosity is significantly brighter than everything, apart from that bit of rope going over that boy on the left there.
Yeah, sort of left mid-ground.
Deliberately highlighted to take you into the image.
Mm-hmm. That's your diagonal into the image.
That's my diagonal in. Yeah. That's the kicker into that part of the shot. Now, you can't control everything in photography in the way you can like a painting, because in a painting you can put everything where you want and paint it how you want. So you have to have some element of flexibility and compromise in a photograph. But when people look at this image, for example, of this baby in there, one of the common things that people say to me, they go, "Oh, I love the colors." And I always find that fascinating, because I actually say, well, do you know the colors are 60% reduced from what they are, and they've all been shifted.
Right.
But they love them because they've been able to process them more easily with all the rest of the information. So the color palette that's there, it's almost like people don't realize the colors are significantly reduced. They don't realize that this has all been toned back intentionally. And obviously the lighting in there has been directed. If you look at the rays of light coming through the clouds in the background, which is obviously a superimposed background, the lighting matches the direction of those rays. So the baby could be getting struck by another patch of light coming through those clouds. The lighting on the items is very much more pocket-like. So you've got blips, what feels like blips of light that could be coming through patches of cloud. And that's all sort of done deliberately to create that sort of post-apocalyptic atmosphere in there,
Now, if you look at this, and I'm sure that you have, but if you look at this side by side, like a diptych, not processed to the degree that with the colors naturally where they were, what's the reaction to as a viewer between the two? Does the other one seem sort of garish by comparison?
Yeah, garish is a good word, because the type of stuff that is in the photo, remember that we had to take the photo as part of a marine pollution project. So we had to use stuff that had actually come out of the ocean that was marine pollution. Mm-hmm. So I was stuck with what I was given. I couldn't choose the stuff. So therefore those colors were going to be in the shot no matter what. So without the post-production work on the color, it would have been garish. So it had to be dealt with. The image itself is still lit well. Mm-hmm. But there's so much going on in an image like this that the additional color would have been, I've found, too much to process. Mm-hmm. And this image is quite removed from my usual style, because I'm very much more about simplicity. So I don't normally have so many complex and competing textures in an image. Yeah,
so, I would imagine you wouldn't know where to look. That you would be sort of erratically going across the image rather than allowing yourself to be sort of guided gently across it.
It would. And there's little things in there as well. Like you can see there on the right-hand side, there's a fishing crate with a broken, rusty fork sticking out of it. Now that fork is got a little bit of a highlight on it, but it's a pointing object. Mm-hmm. So it points you back towards the baby, and then I've curved that rope running from there deliberately so that you keep in that, you don't go out of there, you follow that rope down, and then you're back into the circular motion again.
Right.
So, the way I've positioned things in there has been very selective. Also, if you look at the center of the shot from the toilet seat, which is a lower left item again, mm-hmm. there's also a path of neutrality to the baby. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. I deliberately set all the transparent bottles so that your eye, it's another lower left to center lead-in.
Okay, so let me ask you now, knowing all of this and getting to this almost new level of knowledge in terms of technical knowledge.
Yeah.
How does that affect how you look at some of the older work?
That's a good point. I mean, some of it I've binned. Mm-hmm. Because I'd say that all of my best work has been probably in the last 7 or 8 years. There are still a few older items on there. I've got a sort of nostalgia factor in my commercial site on Reportage, which has got a lot of my older work in there. And I suppose some of it, one of the interesting conversations I've had with a lot of professionals about this is that some photographers are able to do this, but they don't know why they're doing it. Because they just instinctively have a feeling for what is right. So they do deliver great work. But I think people like Gregory Crutzen understand this stuff very well. And a lot of cinematographers understand this stuff very well. So they actually apply it deliberately. Right. But there are other photographers that are successful or produce really competent work that may just have a natural feeling for this, Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe some of my older work, some of the time I got it right, and I may have kept those images, but most of the stuff on my website I would say is more recent, Mm-hmm. It's not always. You can't always control it. I mean, I did a shot I really like recently of this orange motorbike, which is on the website. And I like it because it's a very difficult product to shoot. So many angles, textures, surfaces, and all the rest of it. But I couldn't really control too much the elements of it because it's a motorbike, All I could make the decision was that I wanted the light to come in from more the left-hand side, but overall, I had to concern myself more with the angularity and the actual sort of design of the motorbike itself, and make that look nice, Mm-hmm. So you can't always do it, right? But it's still applied in a lot of my work wherever I can, Mm-hmm. I can reel off loads of examples on my website where I'm the same application, the same process is in my work. But in my older work, if it happened in my older work, as I say, more than 9-10 years ago, then it was probably an accident or it was an instinctive feeling. And that's how it happened.
Now, when you've collaborated with some really interesting photographers, and there are a couple that stand out. Tim, of course, Tim Flack, and Urs from Broncolor.
Yeah.
Are they similar in terms of how they approach light? Because it seems like Urs brings that almost more intuitive level of process, whereas Tim seems more. And again, never having met him, I'm going off of how you've spoken about him, but he seems more sort of analytical and research driven.
Yeah, Tim Flack is a very intelligent chap. He's the person that actually put me onto a lot of these concepts in the first place, that led me to research it even further. And Tim and I run a workshop together now to teach these concepts to other photographers. Urs is slightly different in that Urs doesn't necessarily appreciate these concepts, but what Urs does have is an encyclopedic knowledge of how light works, because he actually knows physics, he studied mathematics, and he designs some of the lighting modifiers for Broncolor. So he has to know the physics of light, and he understands the physics of how to control light very well. And I've actually learnt some really interesting things from Urs off the back of that. But he doesn't apply the human visual process side of things, the biological process to his work in the same way that Tim and I would.
So he's coming at it from even a more sort of removed technical perspective.
Yeah, almost like a scientist way.
Yeah. But it sounds interesting that you've been able to, in working with both of them, you've sort of been able to formulate your own hybrid of each of their processes.
Yeah, I suppose you have, because I do love the science behind the art, and I do love the art as well. But again, for me, it's the light. I'm fascinated by what you can do with light in just the subtlest little tinges of color shifts one side or the other, putting a slight cyan gel on one light or a tiny little bit of yellow on another light, and then bringing them in together in the same shot. And to the viewer, it's so subtle they don't notice it. But if it wasn't there, the image wouldn't be as appealing to them, And it's a lot of that subliminal level stuff. You can show any person who doesn't know anything about photography an image, and they will tell you what emotion it conveys. Okay, they'll let you know. Does it feel, if you take the very rudimental emotions, like, does it feel happy? Does it feel sad? Does it feel scary? Does it feel ominous? Does it feel threatening? Does it feel dynamic? Does it feel fresh, punchy? They'll have words to describe it, even though they don't know how to control light. And the reasons for that is something called imprinting. It's basically just from memory. If you asked a blind person who was born blind and was never able to see, then of course they can't give you those experiences, because they can't give you those emotions to do with light, because they've never seen it. So every way that we describe emotion with light is based on past experience. And it's interesting, because this is another thing that's quite fascinating with it, is that you can associate feelings or emotions of light to do with survival as a species. So obviously the dark was a dangerous time, shadows, caves, going into dark, so
taps into that whole lizard brain from thousands of years ago that we have.
Taps into the instinctive elements of our survival, certain lighting conditions. Then you have times of day where, sun is setting, the light is warmer. This may be a time of day that, evolutionary, where you were settling down, campfire, whatever that, so there are things that are instinctively locked into us. But then there are other cultural reinforcements as well, because movies have continued using shade and shadows and dark and mystery and strong lines to continue that that sort of emotional feeling. So we have another level of imprinting, not only instinctively, but also culturally, from what we watch and what we view, and the things that are kind of reinforced on us. But you take any person, no matter, if they're older than 6 years old, 7 years old, and they've got enough experiences, or any other person who's got nothing to do with photography, they should be able to throw a couple of words at you about what the feelings and what emotional feelings the image describes. And that the words they throw at you will not be based just on the content of the image. Mm-hmm. It will be based partly on the content of the image, because that is the subject, the narrative, but it is also going to be dictated by the lighting emotion on it as well. So that is interesting, because if you're able to know light sufficiently that you can control these things, then you can influence the whole feeling of an image by that greater understanding of light. And then if you combine that with a good ability to compose the image, to for the narrative, etc., the content, the concept of the image, then you really hold the viewer's attention for longer. So you're just using the entire spectrum of the tool set that you have available to you to control and hold the viewer's image for longer. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially it, really.
Has this become part of your process now when you're shooting or in post-production? Are you thinking about it in breaking it down in these kind of simple terms of what do I want my viewer to feel from this image?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So if you take for example, there's a shot that I did that's similar to the painting Ophelia, that famous painting where I've got the model lying in the pool of water.
Purple dress.
Yeah, purple dress.
Yep.
Now, purple is an emotive color, but it's an unusual color. It's one of the colors in the spectrum that doesn't actually have its own wavelength. You only get purple by mixing red and blue light together. But if you actually look at the color spectrum, there is no wavelength for purple. There's ultraviolet, but ultraviolet's below our frequency, and we can only just see it. And we kind of see it as a purpley thing, but it's not purple. It's different to mixing red and blue light together. So purple's always been a magical color. So she's in the purple dress. If you actually look at that image very carefully, think about, so I've lit it a certain way, and I've chosen that location and the rocks and the textures because of what it had to offer. I scouted it out, I recce'd it, spoke with the model about what we were going to do here. It was inspired by the painting Ophelia, the idea behind it. Mm-hmm. But what I've done in the techniques, if you look at the image, is you'll notice that I've got a lead in from the lower left, the rocks down by her hand on the lower left are that little bit extra contrast. The hand itself is brighter than everything.
Her hand's a bright spot coming up out of the water. Yep.
That arm is brighter than the other one as well.
Mm-hmm. Subtle, and then,
sorry?
It's subtle.
It's very subtle.
Yeah.
But then also look at the color juxtaposition. If you actually look at the water in the pool, it's greener.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of green to it. Yeah,
it's got a bit of green, and that's because green's the opposite to purple. It's the opposite to magenta. So that's going to juxtapose that magenta dress out more than anything else. But then the problem I had was very similar with the baby image, is that the rocks are very textural, lots of high contrast on those rocks. So that's all been reduced. So the actual rocks, whilst I don't want them to lose their texture, because it's the raggedness of the rocks that juxtaposes the beautiful skin of the model in many ways. That juxtaposition is a juxtaposition in itself, but it was too competitive against the rest of the shot. So the contrast levels of the rocks have been lowered in contrast so that it doesn't compete. There is no real solid black in those rocks anywhere, and there's no solid highlight apart from in the lower left round her hand. Got a couple of
maybe just in her thumb, that highlight along her thumb, maybe.
So all of that has been thought of when I'm shooting it.
Wow.
So I'll be conscious of it when I'm shooting it and lighting it, but you can't control everything, especially on location like this one in windy conditions. But it's going to definitely come into my post-processing.
Mm-hmm. Did you end up having to pull the color of the dress one way or the other to get it where you wanted it, or is this pretty close to what it was?
It's pretty close because it was a purple dress we selected for for that shot. But I definitely pulled the color of the water around her to the slightly greener shift, but only subtly, because you don't want to make it obvious, you know. And again, you know, the overall tones of the rocks and even the water, they kind of blend. You know, when you actually look at rocks for real, some of the rocks might be richer in red or richer in rusty color, and some other bit. So I kind of take that color out a little bit and keep it more consistent, if you know what I mean. So
I love this image, and I love what you.
Yeah, thank you. I was very pleased with that one, and I mean, hats off to the model, because that water was freezing cold.
I bet.
We had her in a wetsuit underneath the dress, just on the legs and to the waist, but she still had to lie her back down in the water, you know, in the cold conditions. So
yeah, it's terrific, and the processing on it is terrific too. I love what you've done with. You left a little bit of that red orange just above her head on that diagonal coming down from center to left and then out of the image, and it looks like. And I may be way off base on this, but it looks like you didn't add as much green to the shadow on our left, her right side, so it doesn't muddy the shadows underneath in the foreground.
Yeah, I had to do a bit of work around the hair there, where the head goes into the water, because I had no light coming in that side. I was using a Para 88 or a 133 from the top right, as you can see, where it's striking the face. And, you know, so I didn't have, and I didn't want to light in from the left-hand side, because that wouldn't be natural in an outdoor environment. And even filling in the light on that side with a big reflector wouldn't have given a natural appearance to it. So I used the ambient daylight as my fill, effectively, and just got the balance correct for keeping enough ambient daylight in there that I had enough shadow detail to work with, and getting that right with the light. Because I didn't want the light to look too studio lit. It still wanted to feel like that could be, you know, light falling from a sort of orange setting sun, or to have that sort of mood to the shot as well. But I mean, I don't work on location that much. You know, most of my work, as you know, is in the studio, so I'm having to make people or objects look interesting in a studio space. But yeah, no, it is. I find it incredible, because all of these processes that I've been working with in the last few years, they all derive from just keeping wanting to keep learning, digging a bit deeper, not just being satisfied with soft light, hard light, softbox, scrim, point light source, but actually going, hold on a minute, you know, light comes out of this type of modifier and it does this because of this. Or if I use a mirror, that will do this. Or if I use a black mirror, it will do this. And there are, or if I just take this very, very weak Lee, whatever, cyan gel, or, you know, and put that on that light, that's going to do this to, you know, and then obviously the post-production stage is important. But as you know, with me, I don't like to do a huge amount of post-production. Nothing wrong with post-production, but my post-production is limited to burn and dodge and coloration. You know, I don't take things out or put things in. I don't like to do it, you know?
Right.
I mean, there's one image on my website there of a fireman in flames, which is not my post-production work, because it's great post-production work that Victor did there. He took my studio shot of a fireman, and then he did a tutorial for us on how to do comping. And he bought a stock shot, put him into the stock shot, changed the coloration of him, created all the fire embers floating around, and showed us how to build it in. But that wouldn't be my normal work at all, because that's not what I normally do. Yeah, it is fascinating, and I read a lot. I still read a lot about this stuff, because obviously, as an educator as well, you feel, or I think any educator should feel, that they've got to keep researching, got to keep finding out stuff, you know. And in many ways, I suppose I stopped being able to find out any more about photography So I had to start looking at physics or biology or how we see as the next level, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still fascinating.
Well, and it sounds like you're able to still keep that sense of wonder, but allow yourself to evolve and not go, well, I've done this way for the past 20 odd years and it's worked just fine.
Well, yeah.
You're allowing yourself to go, wait a minute, there still might be something here that I'm missing. And whether that means a new piece of kit or trying what you have in a new way, or going, as you've done in the past couple of years, to the biology and the actual way that we see and interpret images and allow that to influence your art. That's pretty cool. I mean, that is way into process, more so than many commercial photographers go.
I would say yes, you're right. And my argument would be that for everyone, no matter what they do, evolution is what drives any species to survive, isn't it? And if we are going to survive and stay at the top of our game, if we are not willing to evolve educationally, artistically, what's the point? It's kind of like if you get to that point in your career where you're just sort of shooting headshots or portraits and you've got your go-to recipe method, what value are you getting out of that personally? And I've been there. I've been in that position where you're just sort of shooting the same stuff and you're just wondering, what the hell am I doing this for anymore? And if you have to, I think if you don't have that opportunity to feel like there is somewhere to go, somewhere to move forwards. And I've been very lucky. I mean, I've been very fortunate as well, because, commercial photography has suffered greatly in many years for many photographers. And I've had the education side of the business as an extra facet to the business. And that's been a struggle sometimes, as you know, in the past as well. But I've been very lucky to maintain my ability to just keep shooting. Okay. And that is wonderful from my perspective, because I often get people say to me, oh, do you still shoot commercially, or is it all about the education, or what's your percentage of you do this and this? And I'm quite happy to tell them the information, but the bottom line is I'm just happy to be able to keep shooting. That's the thing. And with the education platform, I'm able to shoot what I want. And then, more recently, other projects have come in, like that marine pollution one, where I'm able to shoot what I want, but it was for a good cause, and it made a difference. It's gone worldwide, that image, and been used all over the place. So I think, to be in that position, I'm very, very grateful. But evolution, as you were just discussing there, if we're not willing to evolve, then we're never gonna take it that next step further. We're never gonna move forwards with what we do. We're gonna become more depressed with what we're doing. We're not gonna be as excited. So if you're not excited about what you're doing, then you're gonna become fed up with it. So I think it's important for anyone, no matter what type of work or what outside hobbies, pursuits they have, to want to keep expanding the experience, basically.
That said, do you feel like you're making your best work?
I think my best work is always yet to be made, because I'm always, everyone says to you, well, what's your favorite picture? So when was, and it's quite often it's the most recent ones, because you got most excited about it, or it's most interesting. But I think, yes, certainly in the last year or two, I've been making my best work, and I've been very happy with that work and how I feel about the work and how other people perceive the work. But I think through this application of the science and the biology behind it and the way I approach it now gives me a lot more confidence in knowing how to create my best work, because there's a reason behind the visual process of the viewer, and it's taking that step back and asking yourself, how do people see work, rather than how do I use this softbox, how do I use that parabolic or Fresnel or whatever? What is it that they're going to see in the work and how do they process that information. That has been more powerful in many ways than technique. You need to know the technique to be able to match those fundamental principles of how they see, if you know what I mean. You can't have one without the other, because if you figure out how people see and the biology of how they see, but then you don't know how to apply the techniques to that, then obviously that isn't going to work either, you know. So you have to know some of the Ors-Rekha type stuff,
sure,
that we spoke about, the science behind the light, and then you combine that with some of the stuff that Tim Flack put me onto, which is the biology science of how humans see. And then if you bring those two together in the middle, then I believe you've got the ability to understand how to create effective images.
If you'd like to see some of Karl's work, including the images we talked about in this episode, head over to his website at karltaylor.com. That's KarlTaylor.com. If you'd like to check out Karl's new free Introduction to Photography course, as well as a ton of other photography education, visit karltayloreducation.com. You can also find him on Instagram at Karl Taylor Photography. Subscribe to Process Driven in your favorite podcast app, or if you'd like to get every episode of Process Driven along with my other shows, In Between and Iterations, all in one feed, subscribe to Jeffrey Sidoris Everything. If you're enjoying the show, you can help others find it by leaving a review or a rating wherever you listen, or by sharing it on social media. Connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at Jeffrey Sidoris, that's JEFFERYSADDORIS, or on my website at jeffreysidoris.com. And if you'd like to drop me an email, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at talkback@jeffreysidoris.com. As always, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you on the next one.